Thanks for tuning into episode 8 of Atomic Talks. In this one, I'm sitting down with my friend Josh Burbank, one of the most athletic guys I've ever known and someone I really respect. Back in high school, he was the fastest guy in state and a standout football player. Now, he's serving in law enforcement and still setting an example with both his discipline and his character. If you enjoy the episode, be sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel for more. Alright, what's up everybody? This is back with another episode of Atomic Talks here. This time I got my good friend Joshua Burbank. So Josh, I've pretty much ever since I started this podcast, I've been wanting to get you on it, man. And that's probably because athletically I looked up to you for a long time now. Like,
oh dang,
dude, I mean, ever since freshman year of high school, like I showed up to high school and you were the dude, bro. Like, you know what I mean? At the school. Like, I know, I don't mean to blame you. But, I mean, you were the fastest guy in state. You were strong as heck even back then. How did you get into sports, and what made all that athletic process start?
I think sports was something for me. It allowed me the ability to kind of get away from being at home and kind of being stuck and cooped up, you know. Sports was definitely an avenue of escape to do other stuff. And then, draw some of that energy. On top of that, I've always had a very competitive nature. So as a result of that competitive nature, it allowed me to do something with that. And then competing, once I got to like middle school, the level of competition drastically increased, and that hunger and like ambition began. Breaking my arm was probably the changing and pivotal point for really taking things seriously, because when I broke my arm, all I wanted to do was compete. All I wanted to do was play, but I was like, I can't do that if I have a gimp arm. So then the training aspect became way more serious for me when it came to like weight training, resistance training, and then kind of dialing in, because I knew that as a result of being behind an entire season, I potentially could be behind from my peers. So having to play catch up in my mind, not necessarily knowing whether I actually was behind or not, but in my mind, right, of being like, this could be something that hinders me from starting. It could be something that hinders me from performing. So I took it real seriously, and I eventually checked myself out of rehab and was like, we're going to just do it myself, because I don't like how slow this is progressing. Going back, hindsight being 2020, if I probably would have went to rehab, they would have told me things that are injured that I probably could have fixed early on or found other alternatives to help remedy earlier. But it's one of those things that, right, yeah, that ambition kind of drove me to be like, oh, those don't matter. But as an adult, you're like, I really wish I could feel those things,
So what age was it that you broke your arm?
So I think I broke my arm in the 7th grade. So that's what, like 11, 12 years old?
Yeah.
Maybe 12, 13 years old. But it was in the 7th grade. I broke my arm.
What were you doing?
I was playing football. It got shot from my knees. I stuck my arm out. And as a result of the hyperextension I had at the time of my elbow, it just dislocated, stretched all the tendons. Unfortunately, when relocating the elbow, damage was done to the ulna itself, breaking the joint, and then when they relocated it, there was a part of it that was stuck inside the socket. So I had the cast for a couple of months. They then x-rayed my arm and they recognized that shattered piece of my bone was still in that socket, so they had to re-break my arm, re-dislocate it, and then take that piece out and then put it back on. So that's what really drove the actual surgery aspect, as opposed to it just being a reconstructive based surgery. Definitely drew me backwards several months in regards to recovery, and then that rehab process because of the re-breaking. Naturally breaking something, I think, allows you to kind of recover quickly, because it's like a weird freak accident, as opposed to like when you like man-made break things, like it's way more damaging. From what I've heard, I don't know. I've only had one surgery to confirm that, but definitely thumbs down in my aspect.
Yeah. And were you always athletic compared to your peers, or was it like, was there an age that you just started to get starting to surpass a little bit?
I was always athletic. I was definitely a lot more clumsy when I was younger. Definitely coordination was a longer thing that took me to figure out.
Yeah, same here. It kind of took a while to grow into.
It kind of took a while to grow into that coordination of your hands and your feet and things of that nature. So high school really was able to help hone in those abilities and put those things together. But in regards to like just physical athleticism, I've definitely always been very athletic. And I think that the difference for me when it came to sports was like speed, right? Speed was the thing. They're like, oh, well, you're really fast. Rogers in track recognized that he's like, you're not fast. You're just strong. He's like, your physical strength allows you to maintain your structure of like your running format. So your biomechanics remain sound longer. So people that can run the 100-meter dash, sure, they could have poor biomechanics, but they're naturally fast because of fast twitch muscles. Whereas for me, my biomechanics were just concrete, ironclad. So when I ran the 2, that's why I was special in the 2, is because my biomechanics were ironclad. And that's why Rogers thought I'd be really good at the 4. Unfortunately, for me, I didn't really have like a exuberated passion for track. It was just the competitive aspect that made it fun for me. So like when I got to the collegiate sports, I really recognized that I didn't have that passion for track. So I was like, I don't want to do this anymore. It wasn't like playing football.
So football was much more fun for you?
And learning about yourself as a person and who you are, knowing what I know about myself now, it's the problem-solving aspects. Running is very direct. There's not a lot of problem-solving, whereas football allowed my brain to have to do with problem-solving, right? Obviously, the play fell apart. Well, I could still make a play happen because of my athleticism, right? You can make a move, shake a tackle, and continue to move forward and make positive gains. Whereas, like, for track, if something falls apart, and that's the end of that, right? Or if you're not fast enough, you're not fast enough, right? You don't have the biomechanics, you don't have the speed for it, you don't have the endurance, right? Something goes back, it usually goes back to your training, right? How was your training regimen done for track? And if you didn't train it, you didn't build it, you're not going to get it, right? You can't just make stuff up on game day in track where you can for like other sports. And I think that's why I enjoyed the other sports more, specifically football over track, was because of the mental aspects of it, the problem solving, and I think it's why I enjoy my job now so much.
And what do you do for work now?
I'm a law enforcement officer. I'm a sheriff's deputy in the county.
Nice. So that kind of involves a lot of working with people and problem solving.
A whole lot of working with people, a whole lot of problem solving. It's literally problem solving all night long, right? Finding small solutions to big solutions for whatever your conundrum is, right? From something as simple as neighborly disputes to something as egregious as major crimes.
And do you compete in anything now?
No, as a matter of fact, right now I'm currently not competing. If anything, we're hoping that we can get into the SWAT games next year, but we're not entirely positive, right? If the SWAT team's going to be ready for that at that time. I myself, I've always been a firm believer of I could just stay ready as opposed to getting ready. So just kind of building myself into that aspect. The job has definitely dictated my training schedule and regimen way more than any other aspect I've ever had, but it's been fun to utilize that functional based format for training as opposed to bodybuilding and strength training from before.
Yeah, that definitely makes sense. And do you miss competing and stuff? Or is
100%. There's definitely a hard missing of competition, right? Competition is always something that it arises, right? Obviously, there's competition in any aspect, right? Doing things, being the most proactive, being the best in whatever aspect, right? Whether it's shooting and moving or communicating and setting things up, right? You can try to be your best, and those are the things that you try to compete against. What's the word? Like personal accountability and responsibility for things, and allowing yourself to be truly like faceting the I versus me thing. Me versus myself is the only person I need to be competing against. So making sure I'm on time, making sure I'm being productive, making sure I got a little bit more sleep, I got to drink a little bit more water, just dialing those things in, right? And being like real with yourself, right? Like if you're like, if I was off, right? Like, I really didn't eat as well as I should have this month, and I was kind of slacking on my diet. I drank more than I should have, or say it was one of those months, where it just happens where you're like, all my workouts this month were kind of half-assed. Like they were a little more phoned in than I would have liked, right? So then you just got to kind of be honest with yourself and try to really dial those things in and recognize why you're half-assing things, why you're missing workouts, why you're doing those things, and more or less hold yourself accountable as to what those whys are, and then kind of build from there, right? Because it's something so important that if you're not able to be honest with yourself in that sense, well, what happens when somebody else wants to look at that, right? The level of integrity has to be there.
And for you, what are your usual whys, I guess? Like, what slows you down in the day?
It depends, man. It's a whole bunch of stuff, right? Whether it's being tired, right? You obviously, but being tired is never it's never a viable excuse, right? Because you think about all the dogs out there, right? Everybody that's somebody, they can't let that be their excuse of, oh, I was just tired, right? I didn't sleep enough, I didn't eat enough, right? There's it's one of those things, right, where that voice has to be stronger than everything else, right? That voice inside of being like, hey, man, like you wanted this at one point, right? There's that dog in there. Like, hey, where's that guy at? Where's that guy at? That little guy being like, you're getting comfortable, you're getting complacent. Complacency kills, man. Complacency kills in ambition. Complacency kills in environment. And kills in development. So if you allow yourself to become complacent because it's comfortable, because it's easy, well, that's easy, right? That's the easiest way to slip into those things, right? Those voices come out and they're like, oh, well, you worked out yesterday. Oh, well, you moved a whole lot of weight yesterday. You did back squats and deadlifts. It's okay to get a little bit of rest. It's okay to, and it's those things, right, that allow you to like make it feel like it's okay because you worked hard yesterday. But it's one of those things, right, of the hungriest person in the room for yourself has to be you tomorrow, right? The only person that's going to beat you today is you tomorrow. So if you're not constantly in that mindset of like being hungry, being focused, right? Well, you'll miss stuff. And you got to remember what that goal is, right? The little goals and then the big goals to get to those, the little goals to get to the big goal, right? What is the big goal, right? Okay, well, what is the big goal, right? And if you don't have that big goal, well, it makes it real easy to get your vision muddled. Right, and those are the things, right? That's when little voices start coming in, and you get confused, you get lost, you get complacent, you miss workouts, you don't eat because you're like, well, I'm not really that hungry. Well, I'm not eating. Well, now that's going to affect that workout, right? Say I got that heavy set of squats, I got that heavy set of rows. Those are what if they're in the same day? Oh, well, I didn't eat today because I wasn't that hungry. Well, that's going to take away from that workout. Take away from that workout could take away from that goal, right? And it's those things. I think complacency is probably my hardest thing to constantly kick because complacency is so easy to be there, right? Because it's so easy to recognize the hard work you put in, right? Oh, I'm probably the most in shape I've ever been. Oh, I'm the strongest I've ever been. I'm the leanest I've ever been. I'm the heaviest I've ever been. Whatever, right? Whatever that goal is, you're like, I'm getting there. I'm making progress. But the situation presents itself where, is it enough? Right? You have to be honest with yourself. Is it enough? And you'd be like, well, I don't think it's enough. Right? Somebody out there's trying to eat my lunch. Is it enough? And for me, it's that consistency, right? Of trying to consistently level up, trying to consistently develop, trying to consistently grow, right? And to be something more than myself. And on top of that, right, then you start to develop into the other aspect, right? Is the community aspect, right? The people in the gym, the people in the community, the people around you. Who do you inspire? And if they see you grinding, they see you getting after it. For all I know, Adam's looking at me, Adam's paying attention. If I'm slacking and I'm not on today, well, Adam's gonna think it's okay, right? And then someone so sees you, right? And they're like, you're somebody else is somebody, right? And they're like, oh, well, Adam's kind of chilling today, so I'm gonna chill today, right? And what could that do for your community? Your entire community is now in a slump because you didn't decide to bring it. You never know, right?
Yeah.
You never know who's watching. You never know who's paying attention, right? And sure, right? This could be all crazy hearsay shenanigans in my head, right? But it's something, to keep me motivated, to keep me focused. Of like, you never know who's watching. You never know if there's that 13-year-old boy in the room he's looking for that dog, and he'll chase you for his entire life. You'll be his that character, that white whale for forever.
Yeah, that's actually pretty profound, dude. Like, yeah, I didn't think about that, like a ripple effect, and how that's one way to really keep yourself motivated, is to always be thinking about who's watching and who's getting affected by the things you're doing.
It's simple stuff, man. But it's wild to think about, right? Like, it takes a long time to get to that point of, like, self-awareness per se, right? Where you're like, well, at what point do you start to become that character? At what point do you start to be that guy? But it's one of those things, right? Where we go back in time and talk about when we saw Larry Wheels pick up 800 pounds, and we're like, what was that? Who is that guy? 25-year-old Larry Wheels is picking up 900 pounds, 800 pounds. He's doing it for reps. Like, that's insanity, and putting yourself in that perspective of, like, what if I could get there? What if I could be that strong? Like, we go back, 7 years, 10 years, and you're going to tell me that, hey, man, you're going to pick up 550 pounds in deadlift reps. I'd be like, you're crazy. That's insanity. Negative. It's a pipe dream. That's like Instagram fantasy shenanigans, right? But it's a reality because of consistency, right? Being consistent, being driven, being focused gets you to that point. And it's one of those things of never fully allowing myself to stop has allowed that development to occur and reach those, like, kind of weird levels of strength, right? And being like, I can row 315 pounds. Like, you say it out loud and you're like, that's crazy, but, like, you think about it and you're like, well, it's just another day, like, I guess. But again, going back through your notebook and recognizing where that strength comes from. Keeping those notebooks has definitely been one of the coolest things I have in regards to being able to be like, where did this start? And you could literally flip back, notebook after notebook after notebook, and be like, right here. The SBD program started here, and because of the SBD program, we were rowing heavily. I developed hard row strength here, developed hinge strength here, right? I know for a fact my hinge is super strong because of that moment, right? Going back when I started squat, bench, and deadlift and being like, we're going to eat 4,500 calories every day. We're going to squat, bench, and deadlift every day. We're going to lift in a 5x5 program. We're going to live in a box. And that's all we're going to do every other day. This is our life. And then we're going to do nothing but ox work, nothing but in between stuff to work all those little muscles out. And then from that point, I was really strong. And I really wonder, like, if I would have continued on that point, from that point, how strong I would have actually become. Because after that point, I went to the academy, and my lifestyle changed, right? But if I would have just stayed there, how strong would I actually be? Because of consistency. Or was it one of those things where, because of the stopping, I prevented injury?
Okay. And then what age did you start doing the SBD stuff?
If I recall correctly, the SBD stuff would have started when I was about 24.
Okay. Nice. Yeah, that's really cool, because, like, you'll see a lot of people will kind of have this idea that if they don't start in high school or something like that, they're not going to get strong or something like that. But I mean, if you're starting at 24, you can definitely start getting strong even in your 20s then.
No, for sure. Right. And I think the aspect comes from, like, strength for a majority of stuff as a result of technique, right? Like, I always tell people, like bench press is 40% strength, 60% technique. If you learn how to pin properly, right, like you're going to lock up that back, you're going to be able to use the driving force of your legs, control the contractions, control the weight, utilizing the synergist motion between your biceps and your lats, you're going to have a really strong bench. But it's that process of learning the systems, really harping on those compounds, right? And how they all build. They're all building blocks, right? Your deadlift affects your squat because of how you learn how to brace. That brace then translates into your bench press because now you know how to brace. But that brace also learns how to drive from the ground. Driving from the ground back to your deadlift, right? I'm driving my body into the ground. I'm screwing into the ground. I'm pressing the initial portion and then hinging the rest. But learning these steps, learning these processes, and then figuring out how they all compound against each other really develop that process. So I think as long as you can get out of your own way, I think a lot of people have issues with ego, right? You're like, well, I'm a 20-year-old guy. I'm 220 pounds. Like, I should be able to lift lots of weight, right? Right? Nobody wants to be sissies in the gym, right? You're like, dang, dude, this isn't Winnie Hunt Juniors. You know, you want to feel like the ironclad guy. You want to feel like that guy. But that's the thing, is the gym is one of the most humbling places because you got to start somewhere. And if you're not, huge things, right? Muscular imbalances. Muscular imbalances are so massive when it comes to injuring yourself on that road to the top. So if you're not willing to fix those muscular imbalances with the lighter weight, with the proper restrictive forms, with even like odd-based training, right? Like band training, chain training, things like that, right? To fix these muscular imbalances, well, you'll never get there because you're going to injure yourself before you're actually strong enough to use that muscle. And it takes time. It takes time. Like, those are the things where true maturity in the gym come from. Of being like, yeah, sure, I can ugly curl 45 pounds. Or I could strictly curl 30 pounds. And make a lot of progress. You know, being able to get out of your own way for you know, simple stuff. Working to, like, you don't have to consistently work to failure. You know, another huge one that people forget about is consistency, right? People are like, oh, well, if I'm not in there Dorian Yatesing every set, I'm not going to grow. And it goes back to, like, that compounding system, right? The exponential curve that happens. If you work out 4 times a week for 52 weeks, you know, that gives you a number. But within that for 4 times a week for 52 weeks that you have for that year, you're doing 10 sets of 10 reps. Okay, that's 10 sets of 10 reps. 10 sets of 10 reps multiplied by 4, multiplied by 52, right? Those numbers start to grow. However, I think a lot of misconception comes into the gym when it comes to exertion versus exhaustion. I'm pretty sure you and I have had this conversation of the exertion versus exhaustion talk, where exertion involves the stress of that movement, the stress of that muscle, right? That stress of that of that set, of that isolation. And the stress triggering a response in the body of being like, I'm not physically strong enough to move this any more times, and he wants to keep moving it. We have to adapt. Versus doing 10 sets of 10 reps at a weight that you could pick up 1,000 times. Sure, 10 sets of 10 reps at a weight that is less than moderate. You will become exhausted, right? The pump will set in, you'll get exhausted, you'll feel fatigue, but it's not enough stress to create development. It won't trigger a stress response that creates the body to be like, we need to add more muscle tissue to this. It's not safe to keep doing this. We need to adapt. It doesn't see that. So a lot of people will come into the gym and they won't gauge themselves accordingly to be in that environment of stressing the body out, to develop, to grow, right? They work hard and they see results, but could the results be optimized? Definitely. But that's a time and a place, right? Maturity in the gym, maturity with development. So I think a lot of people miss that aspect of it.
So when you say exertion and exhaustion, so you're kind of getting at like this concept that a lot of people will exert themselves but not go to that point of exhaustion, and
totally. So they'll exert themselves in the sense of exhaustion, right? So for example, right, I could pick up a 10-pound dumbbell, and I can pick up 10-pound dumbbell, and I can pick it up over my head, and sure, I have no problem picking it up. I know for a fact that there's at no point I'm actually going to have to utilize anything else besides like simple muscles to be like over my head. But if I was to do it 100 times, are my shoulders going to feel fatigue? Yes. But will my shoulders at any point trigger a response to the body to be like, hey, I'm in danger. I need to grow more muscles to keep doing this action because he keeps doing this? No, it'll never happen. And that goes back to the muscle systems that I've already created, right? The muscle systems you already create are going to dictate how much weight you pick up, you move, right? Because it's all essentially it's all stress. That's all it is. Resistive based training. So your body picks something up and it's like, ho, that's heavy. And then you pick it up over your head and it's like, the shoulder doesn't like that. That's heavy, right? You do it for 5 reps. And the body's like, hey man, we're getting close to that point of like, I'm not gonna be able to pick that up again. You do 2 more reps, right? You get 7. Body's like, definitely not going to be able to do 8, right? And you force rep 8. Cool. That's one whole set, right, of extreme stress. The body got to that point of like, and then pushed past of into failure, right? Not necessarily is the muscle like extremely fatigued, but it's stressed, right? The fatigue of the burning sensation with the lactic acid buildup doesn't necessarily have to be there to be in an environment to grow. That's that toss up, right? Like back to the original conversation you and I have had ancient times ago about how your central nervous system can be completely torched, and necessarily your muscles don't feel like it, but because the central nervous system's gassed, you can't move it. Similar aspect. It all flows around that avenue of the aspect of doing it, in how certain muscles, and well, not certain muscles, I should say certain movements, you can isolate on and get a lot of really great development because you're isolating and you don't have to go as heavy. But certain things, right, where it's like a compound, you have to, right? I can get on the bench press and throw 135 on there and do sets at 25, and will I see stress? Sure. But will I receive enough stress to where my body's like, I need to put more tissue on? Isn't going to happen. And it's because my body knows that physically it has enough strength and muscle tissue to move nearly 400 pounds. So is it going to need more muscle tissue to move 135 pounds? Not going to happen. But muscular endurance and muscular strength are not the same.
Okay. Yeah, so that's kind of the point you were getting at with the 10-pound dumbbell, is that you'd be training muscular endurance if you did that 100 times.
Mm-hmm.
But if you got a heavy enough dumbbell and just force that 8th rep out, total exhaustion, it's going to make them grow.
It completely changes the game, right? And again, I think a lot of people get lost when it comes to their training as a result of not knowing what they're training for, right? There's a time and a place for muscular endurance. If you're going to be a marathon runner, definitely, right? You plan on doing certain types of movements where muscular endurance becomes essential, definitely, right? But if your goal is to bodybuild, right, you are trying to physically develop something, no. Don't do that to yourself. You're going to, and I think that's where a lot of people lose their luster for lifting weights or weight training and being physically active, because, well, they're not getting the results they're looking for because they're not doing the training that's necessary.
Yeah. I feel like a lot of people, whenever they think of fitness, they automatically, their brain goes to cardiovascular fitness. Like, you'll get like a doctor who will kind of, especially doctors will do this. I feel like they'll like equate fitness with just cardiovascular fitness and kind of neglect all
the other aspects to it. Yeah.
And you've always been kind of more interested in the strength aspect of things, probably, right? I mean, I've never seen you do like really long distance things.
So it's all about performance-based training. I have always been strictly built around performance-based training, right? What is the goal of my training? Where do I need to be? What do I need to do, right? Am I training for strength? Am I training for endurance? Am I training for functionality? Am I training for mobility? What is this purpose? And I think that's the aspect where, like, I've always been really good about versus, the masses, is being able to clear that message and then focus on it. Because of the ability to focus on that direction of whatever my goal is, right? The training purpose. it allows me to just kind of tweak things and dial things in. The dials and switches of do this, not this. This is a good thing. This is a bad thing. I like this for these days, right? And then really focus on the smaller goals to the big goal. Whereas I've never had a situation where I've wanted to be, a marathon runner. I've never had a situation where I need to train for excess numbers of endurance-based training. It's never been something I needed. Now, functionality-wise, right? Functional training and you utilizing your VO2 max for sure. That's been something I've played with, but that's definitely not. The endurance stuff is not my thing, right? Utilizing your VO2 max is something that, again, that's an upper echelon level of thinking, because it comes with skill and it comes with exposure, right? But your VO2 max can be stressed and developed so you can have a upper level of muscular endurance per se, because it's how your body processes utilizing oxygen. Mm-hmm. And that could come from doing your compound movements, right? Your breath scheme and your compound movements could completely dictate your development, and you could be training VO2 max and you don't even know it. Yeah. So for example, you're doing sets of heavy squats, right? And you're breathing once every 4 squats. Your body's going to have to be fighting for oxygen. So meaning it's going to learn how to utilize that oxygen more efficiently, increasing your VO2 max. It's a wild thought. And I've never done any direct studies to figure it out, but I've recognized the difference in my own training of being I've trained breath scheme on purpose, and then times when I haven't trained breath scheme and I'm just trying to bang out my reps, and the difference in consistency.
Okay, so you're saying that you kind of theorize that holding your breath for multiple reps on the squat could help increase your VO2 max more than not holding it over multiple reps?
No, totally. Right. Okay. Obviously, it's not going to be the best performance, right? Right. If you're strength training specifically, and you need all the oxygen every moment because these are the heaviest squats, right? It's sets of 3s. Then yeah, don't do that. That's terrible. But again, purpose.
Yeah. And what would you say your general purpose is? Is it do you set goals as far as how much weight you want to lift?
So for right now, my current purpose in my current training scheme is all dictated around being obviously being a law enforcement officer and being a SWAT team member, right? So all my guys, we're all big guys on the team. So being able to physically move my teammates if something did catastrophically happen is a major factor for me, right? And so
you pick somebody up.
Yeah, physically be able to pick them up, move them, and then be functional, right? That's the biggest thing is being able to be functional, be athletic in that circumstance, right? So we're sitting there in full kit doing the thing, and if something bad happens, well, I don't want to be the weakest link, right? I don't want to be the guy to be hey, go pick him up. And I'm well, he's kind of heavy. Not only is he kind of heavy naturally, but he's kind of heavy with all kinds of gear on now, right? So that's been a big thing, right? Is the strength and dynamic strength, I should say, has been a big contributing factor of my training style now.
Okay.
So it's a lot of explosive strength, a lot of dynamic strength, but a lot of mobility, right? So keeping that mobility in place of being able to lift and twist, lift and turn, pick things up with an explosive fashion, but utilizing your same fundamental functions and fundamental building blocks of your strength training stuff, right? Being able to brace, being able to stabilize, but implementing these other aspects, right? Of weighted lunges and weighted carries and duck walks and stuff like that. It's a very interesting dynamic because I've never been a fan of CrossFit, but they're really good about those things when it comes to the Oli lifts and developing mobility, developing that explosive base strength. So that's a new thing that's been implemented in my little world.
Oli lifts, what does that mean?
All your Olympic lifts, right? So it's going to be your clean and jerk, your clean and press, your snatch.
More power-based movements.
Yeah, but it's not just simple power, right? It's not like a back squat. It's a little bit more to it that changes that dynamic of that movement, and it creates this other thing where your brace movement to your explosion becomes something more, And that's been it for me in regards to the difference in training now versus training previously. Has been those the functionality based aspects of it.
And earlier, this is kind of like back a little ways here, but at some point you were talking about bench press and the interconnection between the bicep and the lat.
Oh yeah.
Could you expand on that a little bit? I feel like I never been talking about that.
So you think about it, right? So your bicep and your lats are going to be your synergy based muscles for your bench press, right? So those are going to be your connective tissues that are going to help either suck in the weight to your chest and then stabilize it when it's sitting on top of it. But as long as those guys are active and they're actively like creating synergy, right? It's going to stretch that chest. Well, it's going to give you a little bit of inertia because that chest is now going to release when you start pressing. So it creates a synergist muscle group similar to like wearing a slingshot while doing bench press. The slingshot's there to mimic what the natural creation of that movement would be in regards to your lats and your biceps. But being able to learn how to stabilize those things and create that tension in the chest will grow that ability to press. And again, it's all about just connective tissues and learning how to create cues within the pattern. Creating cues within the pattern, whether it's your bench press, your overhead press, your deadlift, your squat, all play factors, right? Because your body is able to recognize cues and be like, okay, now it's go time. And then again, with the stability control aspect, right? If you're locked in your lats, you're locked in your biceps, you're locked in that position where it's tied over your chest, but you're grounded hard. When you start driving that weight up, well, all your energy is going into that bar. It's all going into the right place, up, right? You're not losing energy. Whereas, say your hips aren't locked in and you're not bracing properly. Well, now the energy from the ground that you have from driving into the ground is lost somewhere, right? It's going to go somewhere else, and then that's going to create an instability. Or say you don't have your lats locked in and you're kind of floating around. Well, none of the bars are going to be doing all this weird pattern of creating this wobble on its way up, as opposed to just a clean pattern.
Yeah.
And that's again from stability control, from the synergist muscle groups.
Nice. So yeah, that's very interesting. I hear people talk about the lats quite often on the bench just to kind of get the back tight and whatnot. I almost never hear people mention the biceps, so that's very interesting to me.
So again, it's just so your lats are going to be there, right? And your biceps are just there to control it.
Okay.
That's where the simple aspect of what I've been taught is that your biceps are there to control it, right? Because those are going to help load your triceps. Hold on there. So,
you said the kind of the goal around your training right now is oriented a lot around. If you need to get going, it's totally fine.
I think. Hold on. Let me take this real quick.
Okay. Yeah. No worries.
Let me see what he says. Yo, you alright?
Good, brother.
I'm in an interview.
Just real quick. Thanks for the snack compartment. Set it all up.
Okay, wonderful. I'm glad you got it set up. All right. Be safe. Love you, bye. Okay, we good. He's good. He was just sending me the tent that I let him have.
Send you the what?
Oh, I let him have a tent. That's my little brother.
Oh, nice, cool. Going camping or something?
Yeah, he went camping, so he's like super excited about it. He's like, look, and I was like, oh, all right, man. I thought you were dying.
So you had mentioned that a lot of the goal of your training recently has been about like functionally being able to pick up people and move them around and the various different athletic endeavors that you'll have to do for the SWAT team.
Oh yeah.
And how does a good training session with that goal in mind go for you? Does it still involve a lot of compound lifts? Does it?
Yeah. So for me, it's a mix, right? So the compound lifts are there to develop the strength because you can't do it any other way. At least not as efficiently, I should say, in my opinion, right?
Yeah, I like that a lot.
Right. So and it's not just for SWAT stuff, right? It's obviously for basic patrol as well, because it's any day, any time, right? So sometimes you need it, sometimes you don't, and I'd rather have it, not need it, than need it, not have it. But when it comes to my training now, it's going to be broken into two different sections, right? Volume and effort. So similar to the conjugate method in regards to that philosophy. But with the volume-based stuff, you're going to train volume, you're going to train for specifics in regards to muscular hypertrophy. And then your effort is going to be all your strength stuff. But then followed by those things are going to be movements that are going to stress mobility, right? So weighted lunges, weighted duck walks, drags, sprints, and then doing those things in conjunction to your compound lifts, other stuff, right? Other days, right? Break it up. So like a good breakup day, and this is probably like my favorite, will be like, so it'll be back squats, like heavy back squats, but like for sets of 10, right? So we're going to be stressing the body out on purpose. So heavy back squats for sets of 10. You're going to do like a weighted lunge, and then you're going to go in and you're going to run 400 meters. Then you'll do a set of 10 pull-ups, and you'll do it again. And you'll do it for 1.5 miles.
Whoa. Okay, so you'd be doing 400 meters each time until you get up to 1.5 miles?
Yeah.
Okay. Wow. So that's like 6.
Yeah, it's about 6 rounds. Yeah.
Okay. And that leaves you pretty tired after.
Oh, it's pretty exhausting. The back squats definitely, I think, really kill the body because of the amount of compounding that's happening, right? And being able to utilize all those good cues and skills that you develop, right, through the powerlifting aspects of it. And then, like, so for me now, right, that's my developmental cues. And having that, being able to brace, being able to stabilize, hit my squats, and then go into the next movement, right, of lunging and being like, I'm on fire, my body's tired, it doesn't, like, my back is tired, my shoulders are tired, my hips are tired, and then going from that and then having to run. And the dynamic of that entire lift is A, to be physically strong to do it, and then B, to have the endurance that if it was the worst day ever, I have the tools to do the things, right? I have the cardiovascular strength to run 400 meters. I have the cardiovascular strength to run 400 meters when tired.
Yeah. So you kind of purposely, by that 6th round, you're exhausted, and you're purposely doing that, so you kind of be used to running 400 meters while being exhausted, sort of thing.
Oh yeah, definitely, right. And every once in a while, I'll do like a weird day where I'll go work out in kit. And those are interesting days because kit it's different.
And can you explain what kit is for me?
So for me, right, so my full kit is going to be obviously like your TAC helmet. It's going to be your vest, your ballistic vest, right? So it's going to have plates in the front, plates in the back. I have side plates. I run my full cummerbund, right? So I have 3 magazines, set of cuffs, and then on my battle belt, I have another set of magazines. My flat, like a bang pouch. I have like a multi-tool. I have another IFAC, so like it's just like a personal, in case of like like the worst of the worst happens, right? It's all emergency like medical equipment for myself, right? So chest seals, packing gauze, Israeli dressings, Narcan, and like tourniquets. In my IFAC. And then I think I have... There's something else here. I can't see. Oh, obviously a holster. Duh.
Dang. Wow. So yeah, you got it all memorized then. You probably have to.
It's not necessarily memory, but it's something like you consistently touch things, right? So every time you do stuff, you touch it. So when you touch it, it helps you remember where it is. So when you move stuff, it really messes with that OODA loop of touching it, right? And you're like, where'd I put that? Like I have a real bad habit of like wanting to put my hands here, because that's where my vest normally sits, but like it's not there. So like you have to like remember like those things aren't there. So like habits will form, right? But like specifically habits when it comes to training will form in those situations, right? So, like force on force training really stressed having things in places where you can use them, where it was useful, as opposed to this is kind of out of the way a little bit, and I think it works. It looks better here, and then force on force training was like you're like, oh no, where is it? And you don't like that. So eliminating those things, right? Trying, a lot of things when it comes to law enforcement, in my opinion, when it comes to the spooky, scary side of things, when things get real, is trying able to train them to a point where they can become second nature. So it leaves your brain with all the other ability to focus on what you need to focus on, as opposed to wondering about other stuff, right? I don't want to be looking for things when I know where they are, so I can focus on whatever else I need to be processing. And that's really where that game changer stuff comes from there, in my opinion.
I see a lot of people in law enforcement that just kind of like, they hold the vest right here, kind of just put their hands. Is that just comfortable? Or?
It's a lot of stuff, right? You have a lot of things, so like you can't like put your hands down, but you don't want to like stand with your hands up and be like Ricky Bobby. No, what do I do with my hands? So like you kind of find places for your hands, right? That are efficient to be able to use them if you have to, but they're not like in the way, right? Because you can't put your hands in your pockets.
Yeah.
Because you can't really get your hands in your pockets, for me per se. So finding other places for it, right? So I have like one hand on my vest and the other hand's like free to talk, right? Because I talk with my hands. And like other things like that. But yeah, habit. Just touching your vest, and kind of putting your hands in there, and just kind of holding on to it.
And you had mentioned you still do the squat, bench, and deadlift, all the compound lifts inside your training right now. And that's because you think that's the best way to gain strength, or probably the most efficient way to gain strength.
I think it's the most efficient way to gain strength for me.
Okay, so you think it could be different for different people?
It could definitely be different for other people, right? Say your backgrounding goes back to like they're an Olympic lifter, right? Or say you did like your Olympic lifts, or you've been a CrossFitter for so long, right? Those could be your best ways to gain muscle tissue, right? Your body likes that style of training. Sure, I don't know. Personally, it's not for me. I never was a CrossFitter, so it's not something I guess I backbone too well.
Yeah. So like, there's this concept that I kind of liked a lot by Mark Ripito. Yeah, one of the OG strength coaches. I read Starting Strength way back in the day, and that's kind of what got me started on the 3x5s and building on the squat, bench, deadlift, overhead press, those movements.
Oh yeah.
And one of the things that he mentions that I think is mostly true is a lot of people have this idea that you want a very sport-specific strength style training, or like, let's say you're trying to get stronger to throw the baseball, or you're trying to get stronger to kick the soccer ball. Like, a lot of people have this idea that you want to throw like a heavy baseball or something and try to gain strength there, or to kick a heavy soccer ball or something like that. And he kind of talks about how like the most efficient ways to gain strength are going to be the big three: squat, bench, and deadlift, and sometimes even overhead press. And then that strength can be transferred onto the field and onto the sport that you're going to be doing through practice.
Yup, teaching inertia.
Do you think that's a pretty
totally? I 100% could agree with that thought process, right? Of you can develop the muscles to be muscles, right? What are they going to do? Build force. They're going to generate force. But you have to teach to do inertia, right? Like throwing punches, right? Throwing punches is an awesome one. You can have the world's strongest guy ever, but if he's never thrown punches before in his life, his punches are going to be slow. They're going to be inaccurate. They're going to be this mess of what they could be, right? But if you start learning him how to generate force, right, throwing that hip behind it, bracing from the ground, jabbing with your shoulder, and really throwing that whole body into that punch, right? As opposed to I'm just striking, it changes, right? And those are skills, right? Being able to be fast on the ground as a result of biomechanics, right? Sure, I have strong muscles, but now can I develop the mobility to make those muscles move? Can I develop the mobility to use that force that's generated forward, right? So you have to do them in tandem, because if you don't, well, you'll have one without the other, and well, that's not officially useful.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And then, do you have any like how long have you been doing the SWAT team for?
I think I'll be a SWAT team member for just under 2 years now. I think I joined the SWAT team in 2023. So,
Do you have any crazy stories you can tell about that, or is it kind of all low?
not necessarily on the low, but you know, I don't know. It's been a lot of interesting dynamics when it comes to the SWAT team, as well as like the SWAT based community, right? Operator based community is super cool because you know we all are professionals in this other way, right? Of like, hey man, like we are all the best of the best at this thing, right? We all shoot well, we all move well, we all communicate well, and we're all good at our job per se. So now it's this dynamic of like, what is your thing? What are you better at? What's the, you know, and holding each other to those higher standards, right? So like we went to advanced SWAT last year in Carlsbad. And it was an awesome experience to work with a lot of other SWAT teams and develop, you know, different bonds because like I said, it's one of those things where like you all kind of initially have that initial conversation of like, we're all the same kind of guy, right? Like we all should have the same amount of skills, and then recognizing the difference where one team practices this one thing and your team practices this one thing, and stressing those different things, right? So my team was really big on like tactical wound care, right? Like say we have an officer down situation, what do we do? Right, really stressing the MARCH algorithm. MARCH stands for so it's major hemorrhaging, so the M, checking for airways, A, making sure the respiration is going on, R, checking for circulation, right? So checking your cap refill, things like that. C, and then H is hyperthermia and, you know, head trauma. And going through this, if there is an officer down type scenario, so initially you're going to, you know, do immediate wound care in the hot zone, right? So putting on your tourniquets, getting stuff like that, and then getting them off the X, right? Getting them out of that immediate danger zone. And once they're out of that, then going through that MARCH algorithm and assessing what needs to happen. Usually that's in tandem with a TAMS guy, right, or tactical medic, and he'll be able to be like, this needs to happen. Cool. And he'll kind of walk you through it, if not take over. But if they're not available, this is what we would do. And we stressed it. And as a result of it, stressing it, really training it, and kind of really making sure it was driven home that this is what we do. So when we got to advanced SWAT, and we were with another team, and then something happened, and they were like, what do you do? And we're like, well, this is what you do, duh. And then the other team kind of struggled, and we were like, oh, so that's why you wanted us to do this, right? Now, obviously, like I said, no shade on the other team, right? It was one thing that we just aggressively stressed, whereas there was things that obviously they were better than us that we were. But it's something, you know. Every team has those things of where we can all grow and learn from each other, and that was an awesome opportunity of where we grew and learned from each other in that circumstance of where we did one thing really well, you know, and they did another thing really well. Like they navigated really good, and they communicated really well, and that was something that we learned from them. Was to just, you know, be really good about echoing, right? Just echoing what we say. You know, there's an open door, and everybody knows there's an open door behind you now because we've echoed it. So it's definitely like different parts and tools that was interesting to develop as a result of being that environment with other operators.
Yeah. And then the medical emergency stuff is what you guys were best at, you said, right?
Well, it's like so.
Or stress the most, I should say.
Yeah, so tactical wound care in the sense of like officer casualties, right? So say we're going to an operation, say we're going to go do an op, and we get to the house, and then, you know, all hell breaks loose, something terrible happens, and one of us goes down. We stress that aspect of what do we do if one of us goes down, and then being able to work through that, right? Of get him the immediate care he needs and get him out. Or, you know, get her whatever she needs in that moment, make sure they're set, they're good, and then get them out. Was what we really, really, really harped on.
So an officer goes down, you carry him out of there. Can you explain from like a first-person perspective what you're going to do through that MARCH system?
Yeah, so the MARCH algorithm, right? So immediately, right, say the situation happens, and dependent on what the injury extent is, right? And as an operator, right, you're held to a higher standard, right? So if you have an injury that isn't like debilitating, fix yourself. right? Don't be like, oh, dude, Adam, it hurts. Like, your arms work, your hands work, you work. Fix it. So they can continue to do what they need to do, and you can help them fix you, right? Don't lay on the floor and be useless. Be useful. And that's a huge thing about, like, I guess the community as a general is trying to be as useful and efficient as possible, right? Or at least wanting to. Obviously, just like Mike Tyson says, everybody has a plan on what they're going to do until they get punched in the face, right? So obviously, if one of us gets shot or something, right, you're not going to you have a plan, but you never really know. But that's why you train it, right? When all shit breaks loose and everything's terrible, you're going to rely on your training. And you are only going to operate as high and to the extent of that your training has developed you for. So if you don't train, well, that's going to be terrible. So to answer your question from the March algorithm, right, depending on what your injury is, right, if you have a sucking chest wound, that's a terrible situation. That's the worst of the worst in regards to that, besides like injured head trauma. But you have like injuries to your extremities, right, any of your extremities, right, arms, legs, hands. The initial development is going to be putting a tourniquet on, right? Putting your tourniquet in the junction, the highest junction, right? Cranking that bad boy, cutting off that blood flow. Once that tourniquet's on and they don't need any other immediate care, right? Because it's only a laceration, only a gunshot wound, only something that you can fix to those extremities. Cool. Now you're going to get them and move them from the X, right? The X being that danger zone, right? Where it's to the front door, it's in the yard, it's wherever you are that you had that initial conflict happen, and now they are no longer in the fight, right? They are now injured. So once that happens and you've done the initial care of putting that tourniquet on, you're then going to remove them from that spot, taking them somewhere that is considered safe, right? Or a warm zone. So you go from the hot zone to a warm zone, if not to a cold zone. You want to get to a cold zone eventually, but if it's immediate, right? So you get from that point to the warm zone, and then you're going to set them down, and whoever's going to be at the head usually is who operates the March algorithm, dictating everybody else, right? So say you got 4 other operators with you, and they're all looking at the thing. You can then make that distinction of what needs to happen, right? Going through the march, right? The other part to march is we in the very beginning, so it's we march. That's how the acronym is, and that's to remove their weapon, right? So taking their weapon from them, because if they do decide to come back to, what's the last thing they're going to remember? Being in some form of conflict, and you don't want them to fight you, right? Yeah. So removing that weapon source from them, and then going through the rest of the march, right? So M being, again, that massive hemorrhaging, right? So you're going to have all your guys check for massive hemorrhaging, right? Raking the skin, raking the body with their fingers to be, is there any gunshot wounds? Is there any lacerations? Is there any, checking your hands to be like, is there any massive hemorrhaging happening? Are they bleeding anywhere? Do they have any sucking chest wounds? Talking to them. Now talking to that individual, hey, can you hear me? What's going on? What are you feeling? Are you okay? Talk to me, right? Because if they're talking to you and they're not like, oh, my chest is feeling super tight, or I have this pain, or what, right? They're just talking to you normally. Well, that's a good sign. A, that there's no head trauma, and B, that there's no injury to the chest cavity or anything like that, right? They don't have any broken ribs that are puncturing lungs. They don't have any, sucking chest wounds that you need to put a chest seal on, things like that, right? So from your march algorithm, right, after your massive hemorrhaging, you're going to check for airway, right? Talking to them, making sure they're breathing, right? Do you see equal chest rise and fall on both sides of their chest, right? Obviously, before any of this happens, you're going to take all their kit off, right? They got chest plates on, stuff like that. Take that off. You don't need it because you got to be able to see these things. So, the airway. Are they breathing? Cool. They're breathing, their head's up, right? They don't have anything in their face. So you can put them in a recovery position where they're sitting up. Everything's going to drain outwards. They're breathing. Cool. Airway's good. Then you go into R, right? Respiration, right? Can they breathe, right? Airway's good. Nose is good. Mouth is good. Respiration, chest fall, chest rise and fall. All good. Cool. C, circulation. So what happens when you have major injuries and your body goes into shock is it'll start, I think it's called shunting. But that means it'll keep all the blood here in major organ areas, meaning that you'll have less circulation in your extremities. So if that's happening, you check your cap refill in your nails and see how fast it returns to its original color.
Yeah.
If your circulation isn't doing well, right, you're going to shock, you're shunting, those will not do that.
So it'll just kind of stay
It'll
like that
stay
lighter
white,
color.
yeah.
Okay, yeah.
They'll stay white for longer, right? And that could potentially raise awareness to levels, right? Say you have a tourniquet on for something, right? They're losing too much blood. They're starting to shunt. They're going into shock. Cool. We need to get him out of here. We need to get him to an ambulance. Do we need an air ambulance, right? You start thinking about those things, right? What is your egress point and how fast do you need to get these people places? Obviously, as quickly as possible, regardless. But it then, again, like I said, raises that level of intensity, raises that level of danger of being like, yo, we need to get him out of here now, right? Because that cap refill is not there. We're playing with time, right? Right? Is he bleeding internally, right? Say that your tourniquet's on, but you didn't recognize that there's something else going on, right? There's an internal bleed that you're not seeing, right? Checking the body and recognizing if there's discoloration, right? Is there hard spots? Is it hot somewhere, right? Those things are things that you can recognize to help make that distinction, right, of what's going on. All right, checking your circulation, and then finally going into hyperthermia or head trauma, right? Checking the back of their heads, right? Being able to touch them, be like their skull feels good, doesn't feel crunchy or weird, right? They're talking to you, their pupils look equal, they're able to have a common conversation, they're not slurring, there's nothing strange about it. In addition to that, right, they're going to get cold. They start getting cold because of hyperthermia. Again, going back to that initial portion of the circulation, you might have a bigger problem on your hands in regards to blood loss and things like that.
Wow. So I'm going to try to reiterate this here to see if I picked it up right. So somebody goes down, I throw the tourniquet on whatever injured extremity there is, and then I try to take them to a warm zone, away from the hot zone.
Yep.
And then it's going to be starting the WE March protocol, and the WE is going to be taking away their weapons, so that way they don't wake up.
That's it.
And immediately shoot you just because they're freaking out.
Fight or flight.
March, the M is going to be checking for major hemorrhages, make sure there's no, or checking to see where all the lacerations and all the different gunshot wounds are at.
Yep. Massive hemorrhaging.
Airways next, so I'll be talking to them to see if this is to make sure they're kind of not choking on their own blood.
Choking on your own blood, making sure that they're breathing through their nose, breathing through their mouth. They can breathe. They're upright. They're communicating. Right, the airway is not obstructed.
And then R is going to be respiratory.
So just your chest rising on both sides, right? Is it equal?
And that sounds kind of similar to the A. The A and the R are pretty similar then, I guess.
They're in conjunction, right? Because like if you can't breathe, right, because you're choking on something, right? Because you're choking on something, you're choking on your own blood, right? You have a facial injury that'll cause problems, right? Because say you're laying there on your back, right, and your blood's all going into your mouth, into your throat, things of that nature. It's gonna be real hard to breathe, right?
Yeah.
So they're sitting them up. Cool. It's all draining outwards. They can breathe again, right?
Yeah.
Or do you have to put like a nasal tube in, right, to ensure that airway is not obstructed by blood? Something different.
And then C would be circulation, so you want to check to see if all their blood's rushing to their core to try to preserve the vital function of their organs and whatnot.
Body.
And then the last one is going to be H, which is checking to see their head
Trauma and hyperthermia.
Head trauma and hyperthermia. Okay. And the hypothermia, does that come from blood loss, or how does that?
It can come from blood loss. Again, I'm not a medical professional. Right?
Yeah.
I just understand the system. So it can come from blood loss. It can come from shock. It could be a tandem of those things, right? But it's one of those things where, like, if something serious is happening, right, they have some form of great bodily injury, hyperthermia can occur, and that's something that you want to prevent, right? Because you don't want them to go into shock.
Okay. And have you had to do this protocol yourself?
Never to any of my team members or myself, but as a result of having these skills, it's definitely something that allows you those tools and abilities to kind of make these assessments of things that you need in regards to steps of immediate necessity. Fortunately for us, when it comes to like normal patrol type stuff, is the stakes aren't as high, so you have like medical on scene and things like that nature that like can immediately provide those kinds of resources, and if not, do that stuff for you because they're medical professionals.
Yeah, that makes sense, because I could picture in most situations, if the medical professional's there, you'd want to leave it with them so you can get back in the action sort of thing, right?
Well, it's one of those things where like the SWAT dynamic versus like a normal patrol dynamic are a little different. If the SWAT team's there, that means it's bad news bears. All else has failed, and we're there because there's a reason that we have to be there. The SWAT team doesn't just gotta go, and it's not a willy-nilly thing, right? We have to reach a thing that's like called the SWAT matrix, and if it reaches SWAT matrix, then we're allowed to go and do whatever we have to do in regards to what that preservation of life circumstance is. So with those things, right, obviously the dynamic is very specific in the scale of preservation of life and the circumstance of why we would be called out. Versus like on patrol, those skills are definitely well translated, but not as necessary because, the EMS can be on scene with you, whereas like a SWAT scene, everyone's going to be out of the scene except for operators and TEMs being the tactical medics.
And then what's the, I guess, craziest call that you've gotten so far? Is there any?
I don't know, man. I think that's a question of perspective per se, right? Because one person's crazy is a whole different person's crazy, right? Like obviously there's a gang of different frequent flyers that consistently call for service in the county. And necessarily speaking, they're not violent or dangerous. They're just a little peculiar, and I see them more than often. I see them too often, I should say, versus the alternate perspective, right, of egregious crimes, right, and that being seen is your level of crazy. It's hard to say, but
yeah. So there's kind of like the difference between crazy in the sense of like literally violent crimes, and then crazy in the sense of this guy is very strange and we get called about him all the time.
No, totally. You're like this cat calls a lot. And you're like, you know them by name and things of that nature. You're like, hey man, like, how can I help you today? Like, do you got anything going on that's specific? And they tell you their consistent story, and you're like, it's okay, man. It's okay. Let's try to figure this out together. Let's get you some resources and let's talk about this. It's one of those things, man. There's some of them, they don't want the help that you're willing to provide them, and it sucks. But it's one of those things of there's never a dull day, right? There's never a dull day, never a dull moment. And I think my favorite part about law enforcement, specifically in regards to the career field path, is that it's all self-driven. You can be as cool and developed and skilled as you want to be, right? If you're trying to put in for trainings, you're trying to put in for experiences, you're trying to develop and be proactive, that's completely up to you. Obviously you have to take your calls for service, you're going to take your basic reports, you're going to do the job, but if you want to be more than that, that's completely in your wheelhouse of developing and cultivating the skills to do so. And I think that's where like I really fell in love with the job, was like, well, how do I want to do it? Who do I want to be? How do I want to get to this dynamic? And then allowing those things as well as the harder disciplinary mentalities of like training and those kind of coming hand in hand, being in tandem, really, really like created a lifestyle that I appreciated.
So like ever since I met you, you've always kind of been, I would say, intense in the aspect of you kind of like to do things at the maximum level, I guess I should say. And it seems like it was like that in sports. It seems like it was like that now in what you do for work. Is there somebody specifically, or like some type of role model or something like that kind of you looked up to in order to cultivate that, or?
Okay. So it's never been like one person, right? So as a result of growing up the way that I did, I was exposed to a lot of movies, right? Movies has always been my thing. But as a result of being exposed to all these different movies, well, eventually I found my niche for characters, right? Like, who do I like? And one of those characters, specifically for my driving forces of who I wanted to be, is going to be Alan Dutch from Predator. Dutch is going to be that major that runs the show that Arnold Schwarzenegger plays. But Dutch in that movie was super badass, right? He's jacked, he's dope, his team respects him, he's there to do something super cool, right? So as a young boy looking at that, being like, oh, I want to be like that guy, gangster. That created that initial dynamic of like, okay, that's something I want, that's something I like. And then you watch Rocky and you're like, oh, Rocky trains hard, like that looks cool, I like to train hard like that, I like to be part of something bigger like that. In recognizing my infatuation with Arnold Schwarzenegger and like his development as a person also became really cool in regards to, okay, so this isn't like he woke up one day and he was super cool. Like he had to do the things to get here. How do we get there, right? What do we do? So recognizing that, like, you can't be big and strong without lifting the weights. You can't be big and strong without doing the things. So cool, let's go lift some weights. Let's do the thing. And then just kind of recognizing different bits and pieces from different like pop culture media based characters, and how I was like, I like that. I'm gonna take a little bit of that from me, take a little bit of that from me, take a little bit of that from me, and just kind of using those things to help cultivate how I want to be as a person. Now obviously I know there's plenty of other like people that have inspired me in regards to being a better person and being some productive member of society in life. But when it comes to like that training aspect and that developmental thing of like physically what I want to look like, it's all the movie characters for sure.
Dang, okay. Yeah, so you want to look like the action hero kind of thing.
I always wanted to look like an action hero, dude. It's always been a thing of wanting to look the part,
Nice.
So when I had the opportunity to put the two and two together, I was like, this is super cool, it all works out.
And if this is like too deep of a question, don't worry about it at all. But like earlier, you at the very start of the conversation, you kind of mentioned getting into sports originally because of this somewhat of a desire to get away from what's going on at home and things like that. Is that because like home was like a rough situation at first, or?
I don't know if I'd say it was a rough situation, right? Because I can't say like I had like a bad childhood or anything like that, but there was definitely dynamical parts of it that were less than savory, and parts about it that I guess I felt some type of way about. And as a result of those things, right, like I really used sports as a coping mechanism, as a thing for myself to feel better, and I eventually used sports. I initially used sports as a way to see my self-worth, right? So like the better of an athlete I was, the better I was, right? The better my skills, the higher my accolades, the better the record, the more I felt like I was worthy of it, right? Like I was worthy of respect. I was worthy of being accepted and things of that nature, right? Now obviously, knowing what I know now as merely being 30 years old, it's one of those things where like it wasn't as healthy of a coping mechanism as it could have been, because of that insatiable desire to be the best I could be, as good as I could be, and when it became time for me to become an adult in the real world, and I was no longer an athlete, how that was a little bit of a crippling moment in my world, being like, well, what am I? Who am I? What do I do with this now? And I no longer compete in the same way I used to. So now my self-worth is all jacked up because I don't know what to do with it, right? So having to reestablish that and find worth in other ways, so it's definitely an aspect that was different, but that's definitely where it all kind of stems from. Was initially banking my self-worth on my athleticism.
And how would you say that's changed now that you are out of competing in sports, I guess?
It took time. It took a lot of time. And again, going back to that internal integrity about, who am I? What am I? What do I value? What do I think about? And being able to be accepting of yourself and who you are as a person, and being good enough, for all these other aspects. And again, like I said, it wasn't an overnight thing. I read a lot of books and poems and different things to kind of get to that point of, I guess, being okay with myself, and being happy with who I am and my trials and tribulations as a person. But it definitely was cool. It was definitely an interesting thing to see from start to finish and be like, oh yeah, like, okay, okay, like I'm cool with this, and like, and kind of recognize my development as a person, and not kind of bank all of my worth and my ability of being an athlete, but as a person that's willing to be tenacious, willing to be passionate, willing to have drive, desire, and discipline, and those were the valuable things about it. It wasn't the accolades, it wasn't the winning, it was the journey.
Yeah, that's pretty profound, actually. I would say that this is an interesting topic to me just because I feel like I went through somewhat of a similar experience after high school, in the sense that, I'm sure you were like this too. You played pretty much sports all year long. And then all of a sudden you get out of high school and you're not competing in anything. And then no matter what was going on in life, you felt like, well, I still got the sports. I still got the competition. I still got these athletic accolades that I'm going through here. And then once you're out of it, it's almost like, well, now I have to figure out how to incorporate myself into the real world.
Yeah, I gotta be a person now. Like I'm something different, and you're like, well, what do I do? What do I do? Yeah, no, for sure. It definitely it's a dynamic change of existence, and you're like.
And I wasn't near on the level as you in high school as far as athleticism went, but I was still good enough to where I could have played in college. I could have gone
totally
to like the next level there, but for some reason I decided not to. I guess maybe because of the whole different level of work that it took to actually get to that next level or whatever. But for you did go play. You did college track, right? Or
yeah. So I ran a semester at UNM, and I recognized that I didn't have the passion for track that I thought I did. B, I didn't like the structuring of it. C, I recognized that collegiate sports is a business.
Yeah, that's kind of what it turned me from it as well. As anybody that I would talk to about it, they would talk about how it's basically like a full-time job that you'd be doing on top of all the schooling, obviously.
Yeah.
Is that what kind of made you decide to hop out of it? It's just
like I said, I just really didn't appreciate any of it. Like I was like not having a good time is the simplest way to put it. I didn't have a good time. I didn't enjoy myself. Like I liked to compete, but like at that point I was so lost in the sauce of all the other parts of it that I was like, I don't even want to, so I did my time in my semester, and I was like, you know what, this isn't for me, and I'm not interested in any of this. So that really created a deterrence for that development and going in that direction, being like, no thanks. Obviously, you can play a million different ways and play the what if game until next century, but it's definitely one of those things where like I think if I would have went a different route and potentially went to a different environment, maybe with the people that I knew, it might have changed those things, right? It would have changed that environment, because I was in an environment all by myself, in a very different world, coming from the small town that we knew. I didn't enjoy it.
You can come in.
Get my keys real quick, right? Yeah, there's that coming right there.
Which one? This
You
one?
can come on in and grab
I don't even see it. Look.
Yeah, I was messing with him earlier.
You out here, man?
Yeah, let him.
Hey, bro, take it easy.
Play, boss.
Yes, I certainly don't mean to push you into that what if game, I guess. But I do have to ask, is there any level of regret in your mind for not delving deeper into the sports?
No, as a result of my experience with my current employment, it's definitely one of those things where like I'm like, no, I think that this is probably where I was designed to be, and it's just because it's all there. All the aspects of everything I've ever done is there. Right, I need to be physically on point. I have to be like mentally on point. I have to be able to do the mental dynamic and gymnastics of every situation, and it's all so stimulating for like me as a person. I love it. I wouldn't change anything or do anything else. And I think it just gave me the tools and skills to recognize what I value, and what I don't appreciate, and things I don't necessarily like. So would I go back in time and be like, hey man, you should probably go do this? Nah, man. Would I have liked to have played under the lights a couple more times, and laced up and played some football some more? For sure. But is there a regret behind it? No. I think I'm completely content with where I am as a person, and the development that I have received as a result of those circumstances and decisions.
Yeah, it seems like law enforcement is a perfect route for you to have taken, especially because, like you said, it incorporates all the different things athletically and also gives you that, maybe not competition in the sense of against other people, but like you said, competition against yourself and trying to be like ready to be that action hero, basically, if need be.
And it's funny that, like, it all worked out in that sense, of getting to that point and being like, I wonder if we're going to get there. But no, like I said, it's something that I would have never guessed that I wanted. I was always fearful of it, and the possibilities of what if, right? The greatest things in life are always behind the sense of fear. And, I was always kind of fearful of it. I was always kind of like, oh, well, I don't know if this is going to work out in the best. I don't know if I'm going to like this, and eventually I came to myself and I recognized, I was like, look, like, you're going to be an old man one day. You're going to be 50, 60 years old, and you physically can't do it anymore. And you're going to sit there and you're going to wonder, what if? What if I tried it and I hated it? What if I tried it and it was my favorite thing on the planet? You're never going to know. Right? And I was like, I would rather have tried it and hated every second of doing it and know that I tried than to have the opportunity of, well, what if? What if I did like it? So I made the decision, as well to, being kind of coaxed into doing it by my friends, and greatest decision I think I've ever made, man. Definitely was able to put me on the right path, put me in the right environment, and allow me to really grow as a person for a whole lot of reasons.
And do you have any religious beliefs yourself or anything like that?
I could say I'm not necessarily any orthodox based religion per se. I definitely do believe, and I have a religious set, but not necessarily in an orthodox sense.
Does that set of religious values that you have, I guess, does it kind of guide you as to where you want to be in any way? Like does that dictate the type of person you want to be in any way?
No, for sure. It definitely dictates the type of person you want to be, right? Obviously, with like your moral codes and things of that nature, right? Obviously, and it's fascinating to bring that up, right? In that time frame of wondering who I am, after having that my athletic falling out, right? I did a lot of time of reading into religions, reading into its development, and religion, psychology, the difference between the two of those, and kind of recognizing where, what's the word? I guess my morals and stats lie, and what I feel is important, right? And as a result of those things, right, it was a very fascinating development of recognizing the consistent message between majority of the religious-based groups, right, and how they have this. The stemmed development of what they believe is do these things so you can be good, right? And kind of recognizing that and being like, oh, well, they're all saying it, so cool. I grew up as a Catholic, right? So I have that backboning, understanding Catholicism and the Catholic based religion. But I also grew up with Native American heritages and things of that nature. So kind of having to walk that plane of both developments and recognizing the beauty of both, has always been cool. Obviously recognizing that there's something obviously directly greater than myself is really simple to see, especially after experiencing, I guess, all the beauty and blessings that I have in life, right? As much as I could sit here and harp and be like, this is hard, and this is hard, and this was terrible, and this hurts my feelings, right? I've lived an excellent life, man. I've lived a very excellent experience. I've had great friends, I've had great family members, I've had a great experience, I've had a lot of positive that I can fully say that I'm happy to share about, and want to envelop onto others, right? And of course, like I said, there's always good with bad, but recognizing the greatness of what was and what you did experience is just appreciating it is important.
And then for the people out there that are just lost right now and that are having trouble feeling grateful for any part of life, I guess, and maybe not sure where to go. Do you have anything that you'd
You know, I
piece of advice or anything?
yeah. So if I had to give a little like tidbit of advice for people that are kind of sitting there in the sauce, right? You're kind of sitting there in that limbo of where do I go? What do I do? I'm not important. I don't feel good. I don't feel happy. Start with every day, right? Journaling has been a huge thing when it comes to my world because it creates concrete images to thought, right? But writing down what your favorite parts of the day were. My favorite part of the day was, and it's something simple, right? Like I had me a sandwich, and it tasted really good, and I was really hungry, and then I washed that sandwich down with a Pepsi, and that Pepsi smacked, and I was really appreciative of it, and it's something simple, right, to appreciate, but it's there. And in addition to that appreciation, right, I guess like don't sweat the small stuff. I think this is crazy. It's a wild philosophy, right, of recognizing that like we could sit here and sweat every possible dynamic of what could happen, right? Could, not will, but could. And being like, well, I could put these pants on, and I could put this shirt on, I could put these shoes on, and someone's not gonna like them, or I'm gonna look funny, or I'm not gonna like it, or it's not gonna be comfortable, or it's not gonna, right? You can start there, right? And then you can be like, well, I can forget what I'm going to say. I can forget what I'm going to do. I'm going to forget where I'm going to go. You can just sit here and just snowball all of these possible negative occurrences. Or you could kind of just allow things to be things, right? Like I'm gonna go and I'm gonna do it, and I'm gonna try my best, and I'm gonna fully apply myself, right? And I think that's a big one that people miss out on is when you fully apply yourself, you fully exert yourself, you give everything you have. There's a level of satisfaction that you receive knowing that that's everything. There's nothing more left. I couldn't have done anything more. And in that process of being real with yourself, you're like, that's it. That's a done deal. Well, no one can take that away from you. Right? And then being content with the fact that sometimes you're going to lose. Right? And not being upset about that loss, but taking that loss for a learning experience, and then being able to have the fortitude to drive further, right? And be like, all right, we got to try harder. Where did I go wrong? What did I do wrong? What did I not do enough of that caused me to lose? Right? Was I not focused enough? Did I not train hard enough? Did I not take it as seriously as I should have? Did I do things that were less than optimal? Right? And being straight with yourself. I think being honest with yourself is one of the biggest steps that you can take as a person to make development. Because if you're like half-assing the honesty with yourself, well, what are you doing with people in the real world, right? What are you doing with people in public, right? If you're willing to lie to yourself about stuff, what happens when someone asks you a question? And you're like, well, I mean, like, it could be, but being honest with yourself, and then, taking your L's for what they are, because you're going to get them. We're not all perfect. You can't work a perfect game every time. And just being humble about that loss and being like, cool, where did I go wrong? What did I do wrong? What could I have been better about? And then continue to drive forward, right? Because you got to remember that life is a journey, right? And it's not about the end. It's about the journey. That process of who you become, not who you are.
Dude, yeah, I like that a lot, man. That was really well put. We're going on a little ways now into this podcast, so I'm going to go ahead and wrap things up on kind of let's say a lighter note here.
Yeah, no, for
sure. Throw a couple rapid fire questions at us.
Go ahead.
Right?
Let's see what we got.
First off, what do you think about science-based training versus I guess whatever the opposite,
like the bro split.
The bro split.
I think they're both one and the same, right? And I think it's one of those things where people like be giving things names and like to label stuff, but they don't necessarily like. I think it's just a label, right? Like they're just labeling things. They're like, this is the bro split, and that's science-based training, and you're like, all right, man. One just has dials and numbers, and the other one's all about your feeling, right? Like, but it's all the same stuff. Like dials and numbers, how you feel.
And do you have any core training philosophies yourself? How you train?
I'm definitely I'm a feel kind of guy, right? I'm like, obviously you have your program set up the way you're gonna feel it, but just being cognizant of what your numbers were last week and then how the body feels, right? Obviously your body feels like it's ready to put on another 25 pounds on the bar. Send it. You're the only person that's gonna be able to dictate that. I am a firm believer of giving it everything, though. So if I feel like 25 might be a little heavy, maybe we'll put 35 on, stress it out, and be like, yeah, that's not gonna happen.
Nice. Okay. And do you have any gym pet peeves?
Gym pet peeves. Let's see. I don't know if I have any particular gym pet peeves. I think it's just being discourteous, right? Like being discourteous of others, right? Their space, being discourteous of others in their training, being disrespectful to others in regards to the work that they put in. And I think if I had as a pet peeve is making the gym a place of festering negativity, right? That's definitely something I don't like, right? I want this to be a positive environment for everybody, right? Whether you're a brand new newbie that's trying to lose some weight, or you're a brand new newbie in the sense of I'm trying to put some muscle tissue on, or you're an old head that's been training for forever and a half, right? Let's all uplift each other. Let's all try to be, warm and excited for each other in that development, because this is a place where we're all the fucking same. It doesn't matter whether this is day one for you or day 11,000. We're all here to develop and grow. We're all here to be better. And if you want to do some negative stuff, dude, build you a home gym and be negative at home. You don't have to come out and be here in this space with everybody, because this is a shared space, and let's try to make it a warm and developing and positive environment, because that's what's going to make us all better.
I've always loved working out with you because you always have these crazy sayings that you throw out a lot. Can you rip off any of those? I can tell you some of my favorite. Or we're about to start a set, and you'll be like, "I'll see you in Valhalla."
Oh yeah,
kill yourself in the set. And then there's I always forget exactly what it is. Something about Coltrane runs all whole grain.
Coltrane runs all whole grain, baby. So it's definitely I remember the not putting extra weight on the bar, and that's why no one will remember your name. It's all Valhalla stuff. But recently it's all been, cause I've gotten real big into Warhammer. So sacrificing blood for the blood god. The Omnisire will protect. In the name of the Omnisire, I will hoist this bar. It's been a real good time when it comes to the Warhammer shenanigans. Big ones for me. Always ones that I've always used. Always thought process of is nobody's coming. Right, you are your savior. You are your protector. You are the guy. No one's coming to pick you up. No one's coming to do it for you. No one's going to do the work. So you might as well get in there and do it yourself. I was trying to think of another one recently. I don't know. I'm it's hard, I'm not a Jack in the moment, I'll sauce up on the pre and being like, "Ooh, here we go," it's just definitely one of those ones, where
you gotta be in the moment.
I gotta be in the moment, but definitely one of those things where I appreciate that, going back to the that positivity in the gym, and having that ability to just start ripping off all kinds of fun jazz and being uplifting and exciting about about this set, about this lift, and let's try to push ourselves.
Oh, dude, yeah, that was. I will always remember those days that we had over at the Iron Palace in Isleta where I would be feeling tired as heck or whatever was going on that day, and then I'd show up to the gym and you'd be ripping off these sayings and we'd be getting it. We'd be going hard.
Those are the days, man. I talk about those days often in the sense of being you don't understand. Me and Adam are trying to kill each other in the gym.
Dude, yeah.
Death by squats, death by lunges, squats, deadlifts, and lunges.
Yeah, I have a memory that will pop up here and there from my Snapchat from a long time ago. And dude, it's amazing how much stronger we are now.
Dude, landslide stronger. There's I have the video of lifting. I think it's 495 in deads with straps, with a belt on, and it is ugly as sin. Versus couple years later, I'm lifting. It's 505 on the bar. no straps, both overhand, and it's clean and fast. Versus like I have another one from this year where it's both overhand. I have no thumbs, and it's 500 for sets of 3. Like,
Dude, that's wild. Yeah, 'cause I can do double overhand with like I've done 560 with double overhand, but it's a hook grip, so it's like a whole chain.
no, dude,
No thumbs is crazy. Well, Josh, I really appreciate you doing this with me, man.
No, it's been right. Like, I'm really excited. Like I said, I'm excited about the development you've made, man. And, super proud of your development. I'm like, you should be really excited about that.
Dude, thank you, bro. I appreciate that, man. Are there any social medias you'd like to drop to for anybody out there?
No, man. No.
No, okay.
All
Cool. All right, cool, man. Thank you, bro.
I appreciate you, my guy. Yeah.